Okay. Hello, everybody. Once again, another episode of the Kazerooni Prince Dialogues. This one we refer to as Middle East at a Crossroads, and I suppose the Middle East is always at a crossroads. With that, Ibrahim, please introduce yourself, and then I'll introduce myself.
Yes, good morning, Rob. Good morning to our listeners and viewers. My name is Ibrahim Kazerooni. As I have introduced myself in the previous episode, I'm originally from Iraq. I finished my academic work at the University of Denver. I left School of Theology and I became an adjunct for a while at the Corbell School of International Studies, as well as ILIF. Then Rob and I have been working together for many years on the Middle East issue and a few issues related to it, particularly justice and peace issue. And so I hope we have started this program and it's episode after episode, hopefully that focuses on critical issues within the Middle East. So Rob, you introduce yourself.
All right, and hello, my good friend Ibrahim. Glad to be back here with you. My name is Rob Prince. I'm originally from New York City, Brooklyn born, grew up in Queens, and just very briefly spent almost 3 years in the Peace Corps in North Africa, and as a in Tunisia, as a Peace Corps volunteer and staff member, and that really stimulated my imagination in many ways and my interests in what was going on in the Middle East and North Africa, and wanted to study it the rest of my life and have pretty much. The only thing I want to add here, I was a college teacher, retired, taught almost a quarter of a century at the University of Denver's Corbell School of International Studies. And for a period of 13 years, Ibrahim and I were political commentators on a program called Hemispheres Middle East Dialogues at KGNU, a public radio station out of Boulder. All right. Well, as usual, the Middle East is filled with activity, hope, and threats, if you like. Almost a year ago, with all the genocides that have taken place against the Palestinians, we have to ask a question of where do we go from here now, and what are the challenges that before us that are facing us in order to get to some kind of a peace treaty or some kind of resolution of this conflict. Ibrahim, despite the fact that major military missile exchange between Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Netanyahu government in Israel has intensified, at least yesterday it had. We want to focus on the events that preceded this military exchange. In another program, we will analyze the results of this escalation of the conflict. Ibrahim, just prior to this missile drone exchange, there were negotiations taking place over a ceasefire. Needless to say, they failed to produce any substantial results. The media here blames the failure on Hamas's refusal to send a representative. What's your take on what happened?
Well, Rob, I think a perceived wisdom exists in the Western media that the crisis between Palestinians and Israelis began on the 7th of October. Nothing could be far from the truth. The Palestinians have been dealing with the crisis literally for the past 75 years. And a number of peace treaties, peace programs, and had already started in the past that led nowhere. And always, as Edward Said once said, you blame not the victor, you blame the weak point here, and for the failure of any peace treaty. This is not an exception. On October 7, everybody knows that the Palestinians decided to ratchet up the whole process and bring their issues to the table so that the world knows, or at least finds out, what is happening to the Palestinian issue. The original policy of the Israeli government was what we call the sledgehammer, that we are going to destroy them, and soon we are going to have peace prevailing over Gaza, and the number of hostages that were taken is going to come back. And this was with the full support of all Western countries, including the United States, but specifically United States. United States began to pour in huge amount of weapons for the Israelis and send documents are available now, send in experts, military personnel, aircrafts, etc., to support the Israelis against the Gazans and Hamas and the military in Gaza. Despite all the assassination of their leader, bombing, genocide, as you quite correctly said, we are close to 45 or 48,000 civilians dead in Gaza and over 120,000 injured, not to mention all the hospitals that are destroyed, schools that are destroyed, churches and mosques and so on. Literally pounded. Gaza, a small 39 or so square miles, have been pounded into oblivion. Finally, at least the Americans have come, and a number of military leaders in Israel, they have come to the conclusion that resolution of the problem and the return of the hostages is not going to happen militarily. It has to be some kind of a negotiation. Hamas, right from the beginning, had a proposal that rested on 4 or 5 major points. Number one, the peace formula for Hamas, number one, was very simple. Number one, permanent ceasefire. Number two, complete withdrawal of the Israeli forces from Gaza, and with no ifs, buts, or this corner or that corner remains under the Israelis, or somehow they will be remaining in charge. Complete withdrawal. They allow a full reconstruction of Gaza to take place. And the full ceasefire has to be guaranteed by whether American or anybody else, because the Palestinians have always had this problem. The ceasefire, Oslo or post-Oslo, before Oslo, ceasefires have been agreed upon, and Israelis have never adhered to these ceasefires. So they wanted some kind of a permanent or at least stipulation within the ceasefire that United States will make sure that the Israelis would adhere. Hamas has never changed that basic strategy and the basic formula, whether they have been present at the table or not present. They have sent their representative full consultation with the Qataris and the Egyptians and others, and this has been their expectation. The problem is, it's the Israeli side, particularly Netanyahu, that every time there is a peace treaty close to an agreement, Netanyahu comes back, either removes a piece from the formula or adds a piece to the formula that makes the whole thing unacceptable to the other party. And to this one is no exception. The last minute, as the Americans were trying to discuss some kind of negotiated settlement, the Israelis, Netanyahu, came back and talked about that they are going to remain in the strip in the middle of Gaza, literally dividing Gaza into two parts, north and south. Militarily, they will control that area, and they would have the full power to allow who goes from South Gaza into North Gaza. Part of the deal the proposal or the formula for Hamas was Rafah, which was the crossing between Egypt and Gaza, would be outside the control of the Israelis. But Netanyahu came back and said, we are going to have full control over it. So this has been, instead of what you said regarding blaming Hamas, the Western media has always blamed the victims for this, and this is no exception. The fact that they were not present because their formula for peace was rested on the 4 simple issues, and they said either they agree with it or they don't. So that was the idea. And now Americans are trying to go through this flip-flops, whether you take part of this strip and allow 1,000 only troops here, or you partially control Rafah and partially Egypt. And what about the Philadelphia strips? What about that? Who's going to control it? They were not part of the original negotiation. For Hamas, full exchange of prisoners of war, their prisoners in the Israeli prisons for the hostages that they have, and permanent peace ceasefire, protection that Israelis are going to adhere to it, allow the reconstruction. That's the basic, and this formula has never changed. You want to add anything, Rob?
Yeah, I'd like to add a few points. First, in previous programs, we've mentioned what appears to be the Israeli negotiating strategy over the years, and that's that famous quote by Moshe Dayan when he was asked, "Is Israel willing to negotiate with its Arab neighbors, with the Palestinians?" And his response was, "Yeah, sure, as long as it doesn't produce anything," i.e., negotiations are for public relations, if you like. At the same time, intensively, quote, changing the facts on the ground, and in this case, the growing occupation. So these recent negotiations fit that category very well. You've described them. What I've read about these negotiations, basically, what the United States is saying about them comes directly from Israel, if you like. It's Israel that gives Washington its talking points. And then I just wanted to add a couple of points here. This is not the first series of negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians and other Arab and Middle Eastern adversaries. And there were big ones in the past that were supposed to produce a viable peace agreement, basically around UN Resolution 242, i.e., two-state solution, Israel withdrawal from the occupied territories from 1967. One was called Camp David, and then the other was the Oslo process. And in both cases, they were hailed as major steps for peace. And in both cases, they had a certain kind of a similar framework. And the framework was Israel attempting to make peace with its broader neighbors, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, whatever, in the Arab world, without resolving the Palestinian issue. In fact, the whole idea of both of these negotiations was to shortcut the Palestinian issue, to deny it. So we're seeing that.
One thing you said, Rob, that I want to interject here, when you said United States gets the talking point from the Israelis, I see this in a different. This kind of a statement gives the importance as if the Israelis are the ones that are dictating the issue. It's the reverse. The mouthpiece are the Israelis, but the policy is dictated by United States. We have to dispense with the idea that somehow Israelis are independent entity, separate from United States. Israelis, I mean, the whole issue, the Zionist project.
Oh, Ibrahim, I think you're freezing now. No, I can't hear you. I see your lips moving, but I don't. There you go. Okay.
The Zionist project in Palestine is part and parcel of United States. It's considered to be a colonial settler policy in the region that similar to what happened in Australia, New Zealand, and even in United States. The control is in the hand of the U.S. administration, but they don't want to present. This is, look, Blinken is the one that at the moment negotiating on behalf of everybody else. That it's in public. So the idea that somehow Israelis are independent of United States and they are the one that give the talking point to United States is the reverse. United States is the one that dictates the policy, but allows some degree of freedom to the Israelis to negotiate marginally here, marginally there. So technically, it's the United States that doesn't want peace, not the Israelis or anybody else.
Yeah, I agree with you. Actually, how all this kind of plays out, and want to talk about it in detail later. So. Yeah, I needed to kind of qualify that those earlier remarks. In fact, I would add the following: that essentially what Israel is in the Middle East, it plays a similar role to Taiwan, to the Ukrainian government in Kiev, i.e., it's a proxy. Israel is a proxy. And basically, it's fulfilling U.S. policy, and it's working in parallel with it. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on. So I accept your elaboration, correction, whatever you want to call it. I wanted to just add one more point about the negotiations now, because it does get kind of confusing and sometimes hard to follow. But my take here is that at the present time, that the United States does not want a regional war in the Middle East, and that even if these negotiations have not been successful, it's Washington that was trying to push them, so to speak, and neither does Iran, and neither does, quite frankly, Russia or China. I.e., for different reasons. Now, the U.S. reasons, I think, are tactical. Meaning what? Meaning the last thing that the outgoing Biden administration needs in the period before November is a Middle East war. That could pretty well, seal the fate, Kamala Harris's fate in this election. So there's that. And the real issue is going to be, well, what happens after those elections end, regardless who wins, by the way, from where I'm sitting, because none of the issues that caused this crisis on October 7th have been resolved at all, as you really articulated in the failure of these ceasefire negotiations. So we have that pressure. And even if you like, it's a window where, at least for the moment, Washington is not interested in taking off the gloves and just a regional war.
Well, Rob, there is one thing else that we really need to understand. It's not because there is a reason why United States is doesn't want a regional war. Because all the bases around the area are what I call will be sitting duck if a regional war started. And it's going to create a biblical crisis, so to speak, in the region. If Iran is attacked directly, the only thing at the moment that they can do, if you listen to the armed forces general that went to Israel and few others countries in the region, they see their role as preventing major crises, but as least damage to the Israelis as possible. That's all.
Yes, agreed.
Because they don't want directly to get involved, either attack Iraq or attack Lebanon or attack the Yemen. They have been attacking it for many years as part of their Middle East policy. But certainly they don't want confrontation with Iran at this stage, because Iran has proved that not only it is capable of attacking, it's willing to do it, and it's not afraid of its consequence. So what we have, once we put all of these together, it will be an existential war for the Israelis, if US does not want it, because of this. An existential war for the Israelis, if it goes into a full regional war, that you have multi-theaters and multi-attack against the Israelis by what we call the axis of resistance. If at the moment, Lebanese only one attack, if they were all combined together with the Iranians, the Iraqis, the Syrians, and Yemenis, I don't think there is a chance of survival unless the Israelis negotiate on a much weaker point and meet a solution for them, which they don't want to. And to be honest, Americans don't want to.
Okay, Ibrahim, one more point, and then I got a kind of deeper question, if you like, for you. And that is one more point about these negotiations, the ceasefire negotiations. What I noticed about these negotiations is actually a framework was agreed to earlier in the year. It had enough of the qualities that both sides needed, and that looked like it was going. It could provide, if you like, the basis of moving forward and at least moving in the direction of a ceasefire. But what we've seen in these negotiations is every time it looks like that the parties are close to some kind of an agreement, that Israel moves the goalposts, as we say in English, i.e., it adds another condition, it changes the conditions, and some of the stuff is it would be amusing if it wasn't so serious. I.e., the Israeli negotiating teams comes up with close to an agreement. It calls Netanyahu, and Netanyahu just says, no, we're going to add this. A lot of times, it's been reported that the Israeli negotiating team didn't even know that some condition was added. So,
Rob, or they have been withdrawn. How many times they were withdrawn from Doha, Qatar, or Egypt, or somewhere else? The last minute, Netanyahu calls them back. So the ceasefire or the agreement doesn't go through.
Right. So what we see here is they're playing games. Now, on another level here, Ibrahim, there's the actual fighting. The fighting is, the genocide that's taking place in Gaza by Israel continues, and we have to ask after 10 months, what really is the deeper goal here on the part of Israel and the United States? And I'd like to look at both of those. So what I'm seeing on the part of Israel is what some people have referred to as Nakbatu, and that resonates with me, i.e., that this is the first stage in an Israeli program, kind of using Naomi Klein's version of the shock doctrine. Use the crisis for October 7th. This is Netanyahu's plan. First of all, to depopulate Gaza, whatever that takes. And that's what the genocide is about. But that's just the first step. And that the second step would be increasing the pressure on the West Bank and creating a situation where people are forced to leave, and thus fulfilling, if you like, this messianic form of Zionism, which has such potency at the current moment. So do you see deeper goals in terms of beyond Israel's, quote, right to defense, or whatever they call it now, their pretext for going into Gaza?
Yeah, Rob, you're correct. If you read some of the the news that is coming from Middle East, and particularly from Israel, when you have these Messianic Jews that are already signing their name on the waiting list to go to Gaza and start building Gaza according to their own plan. Sharon left Gaza because of its crisis. And then Ishaq Rabin later on said, I wish the earth opens up and swallows Gaza because of the crisis that it has created. The issue of removing, remember, the Zionist project rested on the false idea of land without people for people without land. So long as the Palestinians exist, this notion is nothing more than false and wishful thinking. And depopulation and removing the Palestinian, if you go back to the early part of this, the whole crisis, one of the proposals that Netanyahu put forward was for the Palestinian on the Gaza Strip to go to Egypt and for Palestinian on the West Bank to go to Jordan. I mean, you can't have more vivid policy for the depopulation and taking over, swallowing the land than better than this. So they are still driven by the same ideology, but they are wrapping it into a different kind of wrapper and not allowing the negotiation to lead to anywhere. And as a consequence, even the Israelis themselves, ordinary civilians, they say that the government doesn't care anything or cares less about the hostages that we have, the Israeli, as long as they can secure what these messianic concept that 2 or 3 or 4 members of cabinet they are pushing or calling for. So, and recently there have been a number of studies that in addition to this kind of messianic desire, there is huge amount of natural resources in Gaza, both in the offshore as well as inland.
What are the inland resources?
Oil and gas.
Oh,
yes. Okay. And this American proposal that we are going to put some kind of platform to support the Palestinians with their food and so on, was nothing more than a footstep into going back in beginning the whole search for gas and so on, which thank God it was destroyed and finished.
All right. I want to add just kind of one dimension that this thread that we started developing about where's the policy coming from, the United States or Israel, and as you correctly noted, this is a policy in the Middle East that comes out of Washington, and it's not that, again, using that overused expression, it's not the tail wagging the dog, it's the dog wagging the tail. And I agree with that. But that begs the question then, what's happening in Gaza, the way I define it, is not simply an Israeli war crimes, Israeli genocide that's taken place. It's U.S. Israeli. So we can explain, and we have, at least in part, what Israel is up to. It's its goal of establishing a completely ethnic state, fulfilling its settler colonial vision of the area. But then the question arises: why is the United States continue to kind of hide behind this policy, these actions of Israel, where it's also American policy? And the question emerges: why does the United States want to destroy the Palestinian movement? And whether it was PLO back in the past, or using Gaza. And my answer to this is that the Palestinian movement, by its very nature, it really doesn't matter whether someone Palestinian is a secular leftist, is an Islamicist, or whatever it is in between. The Palestinian movement is a radical movement, and it threatens the vested interests, not just of Israel, but quite frankly, in a region where one thing happens, it literally moves throughout the region. the radicalization of the Palestinians threatens the Saudi monarchy, the Jordanian monarchy. Frankly, its radicalism threatens the whole region, and it's that radicalism which the United States wants to put an end to, because it's that radicalism which is essentially a form of regional nationalism. And if you get right down to it, it's who's going to control the resources of the region.
One thing I want to add here,
yeah.
Palestine and the issue of Palestinians galvanizes the Shia resistant movement, not the Sunni resistant movement. You see now 1.5 billion population of Sunnis around the world, and they have not moved one single finger in support of the Palestinians in Gaza or in West Bank, despite all the genocide and everything else that is happening. And for United States, the issue of normalization of relationship with the Sunni regimes in the region rests on Palestinians not to be present. So you kill two birds with one stone. On the one hand, it facilitates the Sunni governments to normalize their relationship with the Israelis once the Palestinian issue is completely annihilated and resolved, and it's no longer there as a galvanizing point for the Shia resistance, because for the Shia resistance, Palestine plays a critical role, a central issue that everyone, whether it's Iran, whether it's Hezbollah, whether it's Syria, whether it's Iraq or Houthis or anywhere else, is the central issue that they have to protect. That is the reason why United States wants, even the Palestinians in Gaza that I have talked to here and in other places, they have told me the same thing. The Arab world, they want us dead, because then once we don't exist, it makes it easier for people such as Morocco, Algeria, not Algeria, Tunis, Libya, Egypt, the Gulf, and particularly Saudi Arabia, to proceed with the normalization, because then there is no problem saying, well, you normalized when the Gazans or the Palestinians are being annihilated, massacred, etc., etc. And then the Shias cannot come back and defend anything. That's why, in addition to nationalism, there is a degree of division, divide and rule in the region.
Right. Yes, the old. Yes, that's breaking down, at least to a certain extent, with the new balance of power in the world and the shifting balance of power. But
just one thing, Rob. Yeah. The United States is not prepared to come forward and allows the proxies such as Israel or anybody else to do that, despite all the support and everything else that they receive, because then they can hide behind plausible deniability. Yes. Oh no, it's nothing to do with us. It's the Israelis that are committed genocide. But who provides them with the weapons? Who provides them with the know-how? Who provides them with even military? There was statistic given how many soldiers came from United States, from Britain, from France, from Germany, from Greece, from Ukraine, from even Turkey. 4,000 soldiers from Turkey came to fight with the Israelis against the Palestinians.
Yes, yes. I think, Ibrahim, we should try to wrap it up. This particular interview, and my final thought on all this is the negotiations, the ceasefire negotiations, failed. They were meant to fail, kind of buying time, if you like, for the U.S. and Israel a little bit. During what was the last statistic I heard yesterday is there have been 500 shipments of arms, air shipments of arms, and over 100 naval vessels that have come from the United States and its allies supporting Israel. But the key thing from where I'm sitting right now is this past failure in arriving at some kind of ceasefire agreement is just an indication of where we're headed in the future. And where we're headed in the future, unfortunately, is more war. And the sense I get, as somebody, and we said this in the last interview that we did, we have been supported peaceful processes, negotiated settlements to somehow deal with this crisis, and more it looks like that what's going to be decided is going to be on the battlefield. I wish it was another way, but that's how it appears to me. What's your final thought on all this, Ibrahim?
I mean, I tend to agree with you, but the one thing I would like to mention for our viewers is the fact that if the ceasefire cannot be achieved, the regional war has consequences for United States, for Israelis, and everybody else, which cannot be conceived, because once the entire Middle East is on fire, it's a slippery slope that nobody can predict the outcome from it. And certainly the Middle East that will come, I remember Einstein once said that I don't know how World War III is going to start, but certainly World War IV is going to be with sticks and stones. So the Middle East that comes out of such a profound destruction is going to be totally different than Middle East before. And it's not going to be according to the way United States or the colonial powers have conceived it to be.
Yes, this is, I guess, my final comment. This is not 1967. Well, friends, we're going to do a follow-up episode on this. We're going to look at this missile exchange, rocket exchange that just took place. We'll do it sometime over the next week. And until then, Ibrahim, I wish you well, and we'll see everybody before too long. Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, everybody.